Hello and welcome to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. Well, today we're going to be discussing something different from our usual roundtable, but something equally interesting. We have Soumya Saxena here. She's written a book, her first book on divorce and democracy, a history of personal law in post-independent India. I have a copy of it with me. And Soumya, as we know, she is a British Academy postdoctoral fellow at the Faculty of History, University of Cambridge. And she's also a legal historian who's interested and done a lot of work on family law, religion, and gender politics. She was part of the framing of the Nirbhaya laws. I remember speaking to her at that time. So congratulations, Soumya, and welcome to this conversation. Joining us is Namita Bhandare. She's a senior journalist, columnist, and very dominant advocate of women's rights, and of course Javed Ansari. He's a columnist, commentator, and political analyst. Soumya, first of all, a bit about your book. You know, the timing is very interesting because it's come at a time when Uniform Civil Code is being debated also, and you've talked about the intersection of religion and family law and how they've always played a part. So a bit about your book first before I throw open the conversation.
Sure. Thank you for having me in this panel, Priya, and thank you for doing this. Just a little bit about the book. So, of course, the timing is interesting, and that's why I was very hard pressed to actually publish it quickly as well, because it did speak to a lot of current events. I think what I'm beginning to realize is the most relevant big bit in the book, even for me, is the fact that it historicizes some of the current debates on Uniform Civil Code. So be it the fact that the women's position on it has actually evolved over time, or the fact that Uniform Civil Code meant something else before it was completely appropriated by Hindu nationalist political party, it kind of allows you a window into what the politics around lawmaking was every time divorce or every time marriage DD came up, because it was hardly ever about marriage and divorce per se. It ended up becoming a conversation about freedom of religion, right to equality, debating essential practices of religion, figuring out where a nation really stands on secularism. And I think that's true not just for India, but South Asia more generally. So one of the things I think the book does is to historicize these conversations. Another thing that I would like to mention in its initial description is that I, as a legal historian, also encountered that there's a lot of ambiguity and a lot of confusion around what really qualifies as personal law and how it's adjudicated, because it's not just adjudicated in courts. It's also dealt with in a local police station. It's debated in parliament. It's also dealt with literally in households and in alternate dispute resolution forums such as Sharia courts or Nyayapits, right? And here what I encountered was a lot of confusion and a lot of ambiguity on part of the makers and implementers of law, but also tremendous hope and a will to convey pain and suffering by the users of the law. This allowed me to look at the law as not merely an instrument of control or a tool for surveillance, but actually discover its very dialogic nature. And that's where I think, it might be relevant for current conversations when we have law commission thinking about it, parliament, court, everyone kind of invested in this question.
In fact, Javed, religion and law, family law has been intertwined, even because, as Soumya also said, there are different courts. Every religion has their own way of arbitrating on family law. So what is your position, on the Uniform Civil Code that is coming up?
Well, my position is that this is an idea whose time has come. The fact that it does, but my position perhaps does not reflect the popular position within the community to which I belong. And perhaps a lot of it also has to do with the fact on how this question is posed and who poses this question. Because it's the BJP which is bringing this about. So there is always a lurking suspicion that it has less to do with the emancipation of women or uplifting of women or making life easier for men. And it's more to try and pin down the community. It's more to try and interfere in the ways that the Muslim community conducts its affairs. So it's very important on how you frame the question and who is framed and who's bringing about this change. The resistance to changing laws, especially pertaining to divorce, to marriage, and all this, is not so much it's my view is it's not so much because it will change practices. Everybody, you ask any in private, everybody accepts that the existing practice, people have misused this, they've circumvented, they've looked for loopholes, they've exploited this, and women have suffered immeasurably on account of this, and this change must come. So if people will privately accept this, but the moment it appears that it's the government which is doing it, or worse, if it's the BJP, it's a BJP government that is doing it, that's the time when the shutters come down. That's the time when everybody just feels it takes on a totally different perspective.
That's a good point, Namita. Law is meant to be objective, but there is a subjective element in it also. Who is bringing it in? What is the agenda behind it? All these things come into play also. So, Uniform Civil Code being brought in by the BJP government, how apprehensive are you of it, or how supportive are you of it?
I think it's time to also expand our imagination and our mind about what is a uniform civil code. The traditional thinking is that you kind of merge all the various personal laws together. And we see it only through the prism of religion. But I feel the time has come to expand, because we've been having this conversation since independence, right? A uniform civil code is desired. And I think it is an idea whose time has long passed overdue. But why can't we think of it in terms of marriage equality between lesbian and gay community? Why can't we expand it to look at gender equality and gender parity, which is also guaranteed in the Constitution? So use it as a living document for change, not just in terms of religious terms and of merging personal laws, but expanding its scope to reflect the aspirations, hopes, and desires embedded in our Constitution. That would remove it from its pure political realm and make it a much more vivacious, vivid document.
I like that. Make it a living document. So, are these some of the issues, the questions that you've handled in your book?
Yes, Priya, I have. And in fact, I wanted to, answer this as well also after, what Javed and Namita have just said. The reason I remain a little apprehensive about the coming of this code is what Javed just said, which is that one is worried about the template of the code, not so much the concept per se, but is the template really going to be neutral? Is there going to be neutrality in this law? Or is it going to be some sort of an imposition of Hindu morality as we witness in so many other realms? And I say this because this is particularly relevant with respect to the hijab controversy that is currently happening. And sure, everybody, including the women's movement, is going to be divided on what works. But the truth, the important point here is context. In Iran, for instance, it's important for women to burn hijabs and make that statement. Similarly, in India, courage is in probably wearing it at a time when you're being told not to, right? So the context in which these laws function is really important. And I say this also because historically, women's position has been pro-uniform civil code. Now, there's a reason why women are beginning to step back from it. And I don't say this as, my own opinion, but this is something that I've arrived at as a consequence of years of fieldwork and my experience in the Law Commission, which is that, of course, feminists who self-identify as religious and feminists who self-identify as secular both had their skepticism about a uniform civil code being brought in by this government. And this was not just to do with the fact that it was a Hindu nationalist state, but some of its criticisms had to do with the fact that the world is moving towards legal pluralism. It also had to do with the fact that, let's say, if we were to codify personal laws separately and come up with a Muslim Succession Act rather than a uniform civil code, would women find that more approachable because the religious identity is not being threatened? So is it possible that we can codify personal laws without imposing any one neutral law on a population that is surely not equal, right? They're all very different, and that diversity is also something that India treasures. So my take on it would be that that law reform is very different from uniform civil code. And while in the current sort of state of affairs, it is really easy to pitch, the Muslim opinion as the only opinion against UCC. But actually, in the Law Commission, what we encountered was that it was a really strong pushback from the northeastern states, because they have been guaranteed these protections under 6th schedule of the Constitution to have their family laws protected. So actually, it seemed like a really complex debate, which was predominantly about women's rights, but women do have alternate means of negotiating with this state itself, which does not entail uniformity.
The first point, Soumya, when you said that, the context is important. In Iran, if they burn hijab, it's okay. But here, they should wear it as a mark of, mark of protest, mark of their rights, or whatever the symbolism is. But it's something that some practices are those that need to be done away with, regardless of whoever is taking the initiative to do away with them. Wearing a hijab to school is a regressive habit or not?
I don't think women should necessarily have to wear it. The larger point I'm trying to make is that whether a state is trying to prove its religious or secular convictions, somehow it always plays out on the body of the woman. Somehow, if it's a secular state, the secular state will insist that women don't do something, and a religious state will insist that women do something, in a way that men don't have to go through this. We'll never have these conversations about a janeu. We'll never have these conversations about skull caps or turbans. It always plays out on the body of the woman, and that's the point I'm trying to make, that if it's secular politics, it also shouldn't play out of the body of the woman.
Gender politics coming in. That's a good point, Javed. Would you want to react to that?
But certainly I agree. Why isn't there a law that men shouldn't keep beards? That you shouldn't go to school, college with a beard, or you shouldn't be in the police, or you shouldn't be in any government service or whatever, or you shouldn't wear a skull cap, or for that matter. But again, you must have the freedom to whether you want to wear a beard, whether you want to wear a hijab or not. You may find it retrogressive. There are a lot of people who won't. In my household, nobody I don't remember anybody, my mother or my aunts or my sisters, anybody wearing a hijab. Yes, my mother, when she went out, she never went out in the village, but when she stepped out of the house, she would wear a chadar, cover her face with the chadar. Nobody forced her, but that's the way she did. My wife goes to the village, she doesn't. She even steps out of the house. So if you don't push it, just don't penalize. There should be, just as Iran is making a mistake by making it compulsory for women. I'm in a place which is an Islamic country, but I see very few women wearing. I see women wearing hijab. But I see more women who don't wear a burqa or a hijab. Nobody punishes you. Nobody holds you accountable for it. That's the way you must have the freedom to choose whether you want to wear a hijab or a skirt or jeans or a shalwar streak or a kurta pajama. That should be your choice.
That's, I know, Namita, you wanted to come in. The minute she said it's a question of gender, and as Javed said, it should be a question of choice. So your take.
I sometimes feel that this hijab debate is unnecessarily being made very complicated. It's a very simple, the fundamental issue here is choice. It doesn't matter whether I think it's a regressive garment or not. It does not. It matters what the women themselves want to do. So in Iran, somebody doesn't want to wear a hijab, and that should be her right. And in Bangalore, if the choice is between going to school and wearing a headscarf, then that is her choice. A girl chooses that I will wear a headscarf, but if it gives me the right to an education, yes, I want to do it. And of course there is social conditioning. Let's not be hypocritical about it. When a Hindu widow chooses to wear white, there is years of social conditioning. Or when a woman in Haryana has the ghungat, there is years of social conditioning behind it. That's a separate debate. But I think Soumya makes an important point about women's agency. And let's not forget that even triple talaq, the government may want to take credit for it. The courts definitely came out with a judgment in favor of it. But who began the debate? The women began the debate. Muslim women began the debate. It was the Bharatiya Muslim Andolan, Mahila Muslim Andolan, that started the survey that showed that 96% of Muslim women do not want triple talaq, do not want halala. These are issues that are still pending on the court. Do not want polygamy. We focused on one. What do Muslim women want? It's not a question of what the judges want or what some government wants or what some feminist activist wants. It's a question of what the women, you have to put them at the center of the debate. Otherwise, that debate is meaningless. You're talking down to women and you're deciding for them. We don't want that.
But Soumya, you want to comment on the triple talaq issue also. These are, some of the moves which may have been taken by the government, but there has been, support of various religions also to it. And also the UCC, as you pointed out, is going to be talking about not just Hindu law, but also other minority laws. So should there be an equal representation? Who should decide as to what is right, what is wrong?
Right. So first on the triple talaq bit, I do think that before the government initiative, it was actually, like Namita mentioned, the two organizations, Bharati Muslim Mahila Andolan and Bebak Collective, which had started putting in writ petitions in support of the main petitioner. And this was subsequently joined by the state petition. This was joined by Ishrat Jahan and many other women who kind of joined the cause. And therefore, Supreme Court actually became a battle for more than one controversy. It was the fact that it was represented by Kapil Sibal, who happened to be in the Congress back then. And then it was, her AIM PLB had joined the petition for her husband, who was represented by Kapil Sibal. And on the other hand, you had state with Chaira Bano. So lots of political battles were also playing out in court. But the core matter was that there was this woman taking her husband to court for not just a practice that was incorrect as per constitution, but her entire argument was that this is also a practice that is incorrect as per original interpretations, authentic interpretations of the Quran. So the larger point that I'm trying to make about triple talaq is that when women fight these battles on their own turf, they are challenging two kinds of patriarchies. One is the fact that, of course, we don't need representation by the state. It is us who are going to file this petition and fight this battle. The other kind of patriarchy they're challenging is the fact that interpretation of Muslim personal law has been somehow attributed to, the self-proclaimed authorities on it have become the All India Muslim Personal Law Board. And these women, by challenging an Islamic provision through judicial methods, they're also arguing that we're in a position to reinterpret personal law. And for me, this conversation has therefore come a long way, because in Shah Bano, women were having to choose back in 1985 between a set of abstract rights and their religious identity. Right. But now it's no longer a choice between either or, right? Women can choose to be unapologetically Muslim and still claim their right to religious reform through judicial methods. So that's the bit on triple talaq. Now, uniform civil code, the larger question of, who really is asking for it, is government bringing in something that women want? Now, if I were to take this conversation back to 1950s, the few women representatives in India's first parliament post 1952, they did argue for a uniform civil code when Hindu Code Bill was being debated. Uniform Civil Code was like this debate that also took place in the background. In the Constituent Assembly debates, you have no clarity on what people mean by a UCC, but women seemed to speak out in support of it. Now, this narrative really begins to change in 1980s, right? Post Shah Bano, because women are faced with this choice of choosing between community and an abstract set of rights at a time when the movement against the Babri Mosque is also at its zenith. There are all these Rath Yatras taking place to Ayodhya, and the Babri Masjid as a public symbol of Muslimness is under threat. Women are posed with this unfair choice of, choosing the public face of religion or their personal rights or their personal laws, which affect them at a that affect their marriages. Now, this choice, I think, has changed significantly. And this is why we've moved from uniform civil code as this feminist aspiration to codification as somewhere in between, as a compromise aspiration. Because let's say if we were to really talk about a uniform civil code, would this government also be open to what Namita just said about same-sex marriages? Would it be open to considering doing away with a Hindu undivided family? Would it be open to considering a civil partnership instead of a marriage if people if LGBTQ communities wanted to enter into these contracts? Would we really be able to imagine a uniform civil code which is optional and includes all of these minorities, whether religious or secular? Then I can have a more open sort of idea of a uniform civil code.
Javed, your reaction to what she has said? I mean, she's made some pretty valid, pertinent points, and I think in sync with what you've also been saying.
Yeah, I completely agree with the fact that it's the context which is very important. The content, of course, is important, but it's the context also which is very important. My only fear is that UCC, if it is brought under one, we've come a long way from the time in 1980s, 85, 86, when the Shah Bano case came. We've come a long way because now people are a lot more educated. People are educated about the subject. There's a lot more information going around. So the kind of resistance that is faced then is perhaps there has been some ground has been covered. But given the present context, given the way that the Muslim community, the minorities feel buffeted, hemmed in, there is this feeling, they feel under siege, under threat, where not just physical, I don't say just physical threat, I mean even their cultural, social practices, everything, they feel everything is just being forced upon them and being taken away from them. So therefore, in this context, there may be there may be that reluctance to embrace this change, which say maybe 5 years ago, perhaps the UPA government missed a trick. They should have been the ones who should have initiated this. In calmer times, perhaps people would have been a lot more receptive to change than now, because now I fear any and everything that this government does, and the blame lies on all sides, is viewed with suspicion amongst 200 million of India's minorities. And therefore, this is a question which needs to be, you need to approach it very carefully. Of course, the BJP has the majority in parliament and in the legislators, they can ram this through. But whether it will be accepted or there will be a pushback like it was on the question of CEA, and that will have to be seen.
That to be handled sensitively is something that I think we all agree with. But Namita, your reaction to what the others have said so far?
For the past 75 years, the question around a uniform civil code has always been the time is not right. So in 75 years, the time has never been right. And I agree completely 100% with Javed and with Soumya that there is a suspicion about the BJP's true motives. You cannot have CAA on one hand and then uniform civil code on the other hand. They just don't they don't gel well together. You cannot have unbridled hate speech on social media by people who are followed by the Prime Minister of India and not a word against them, along with saying, well, no, trust us on this. And frankly, where I do disagree with Javed is that, he says a lot is now known about a uniform civil code. Actually, nothing is known. I think as a first starting point, whether the opposition wants to do it or whether the BJP wants to do it, put out a paper. This is what a uniform, or call for a consultation and put it in the public domain. What does a uniform civil code look like? How does it affect the Northeast, as Soumya pointed out? How does it affect your laws on adoption, on guardianship? How does it affect the Hindu undivided family? We don't know. There's a lot of speculation, but actually, and I'm talking not from the perspective of lawyers like Soumya, who are extremely well-read. I'm saying for an average citizen, we don't know what a uniform civil code looks like. So maybe a starting point for the conversation should be open up this debate, involve civil society, make your credentials clear, establish your credentials. You cannot, as I said, you can't be speaking in one voice somewhere else and speaking in another voice somewhere else saying, oh, we are your benefactors. Whereas in fact, within the community, you are seen as anything but the benefactors. And maybe this doesn't have to be just left to the BJP. Maybe the Congress can start a debate. There's a Bharat Jodo campaign going on. What does the Congress leadership think about a uniform civil code? What do the opposition think about a uniform civil code? Let's have this debate, set the ball rolling. But the time is right now. Because this argument of that, it's not the right time is gone on for 7.5 decades. It's time we put that argument at least to rest.
I wish you all the best, Soumya, for your book and for this conversation. It's a topic that's going to be much debated in the days to come also. But I'm glad we managed to have this conversation. I think it's a pretty good curtain raiser on a debate that's going to be hitting our parliament very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me. I'm a great admirer of Soumya's work.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.